somebody give me the reason why you study history? The $1,000,000 answer. We talked about all those other things, but there's one thing that trumps all of them. There's one main reason why we study history. Igor.
To learn from the past.
To learn from the past. Right? Those who do not study history are doomed to what? Doomed to what? What's it say?
Die.
Defeat.
What's the reading say? Defeat.
Unsuccessfulness.
Repeat.
Please, somebody raise their hand and tell us what it is. Yes.
Repeat it.
Repeat it. Very good. Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Has anybody ever heard that before?
No.
Right? Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And in this reading, it gives you 3 examples. Right? What's the first war that it talks about here? War that we're going to cover in class this year quite a bit.
The Venture War?
Which one is it?
Vietnam.
The American Revolution. Right? The American Revolution. When our country was born. The 13 colonies. Upset with England. Not wanting to be part of England anymore. Wanting to start their own country. Wanting to create the United States. The British wouldn't let them go. Caused a war. Right? At the start of that war, the English had every single advantage. Every single one. And we're going to go through that more later on in the year. The Americans were basically farmers with pitchforks. The British had the world's greatest army. Greatest navy. Who won?
Us.
We did. Right? We were able to defeat the English and win our independence. The British made several mistakes. Right? Fast forward 200 years. The American Revolution was in the 1770s. Now we're talking about the 1970s. The same mistakes that the British had made 200 years before to allow us to win our independence were made in another American war in which we weren't so successful. Which war am I talking about? Vietnam. Right? The similarities are striking. Like I said, we'll go over some of the details later on in the year. But many of the same mistakes that the British made in the American Revolution, we made in Vietnam. Right? We were a much more powerful country than the Vietnamese were. Okay? We had 500,000 soldiers and equipment and guns and all that stuff. Vietnamese had a little bowl of rice and sandals and a funny-looking hat. Okay? And we still lost. The only war we've ever lost. We made the same mistakes that the British did. Why? Because we didn't what?
Think.
What didn't we do? Somebody raise their hand. Tell us. Yes.
Study history.
We didn't study history. We didn't look back at our own history and say, these are the things we want to avoid. Right? 10 years after Vietnam, there used to be a country in the world called the Soviet Union. You might know it today as what? Russia. Right? The Russians were one of the strongest, most powerful countries in the world, and they invaded this little country to the south called Afghanistan. You've probably heard of Afghanistan. It's always in the news, right?
Yeah.
Since September 11th?
Yeah.
You've seen the Afghans, right? They don't look like big, scary warriors. Soviets had jets and tanks and all that stuff. The Russians made the same mistakes that we made in Vietnam. They made the same mistakes that were made in the American Revolution. Why? Because they didn't what?
Study history.
They didn't study history. They repeated the same mistakes over and over and over again. Just hang on a second. We got plenty of time. All right? Now, put it all together this way. 2001, September 11th. The United States is attacked by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is in Afghanistan. There were a lot of people that said, we can't go after them in Afghanistan. The Russians were there. They were there for 10 years. They lost. Nobody can win in Afghanistan. Don't go in there. And we went into Afghanistan, and within 3 months, we had taken over the country, kicked the Taliban and Al-Qaeda out of there, started to rebuild the place. Russians were there for 10 years, and they couldn't do it. But we did in 3 months. What was the difference? What did we do to avoid that same mistake?
Look back on this.
We look back at history. The guys at the Pentagon and the military, they got on the phone, they called the Russians. They said, okay, you were there for 10 years. What can you tell us about this place? What shouldn't we do? And they wrote them all down, and they came up with a plan that avoided all those mistakes. So, you see, we are not doomed to repeat our history if we learn about it. Unfortunately, many times we don't take the effort or the consideration to learn about it. I can give you countless examples of things in history that are exactly the same. You just change the dates, the names, and the places, but they're the same events. Anybody ever heard of Kent State shooting?
Yeah.
Right? Some students were shot by soldiers. Same thing happened. 1770, 200 years before, in Boston, called the Boston Massacre, something we're going to talk about this year before the Revolution. So my point to you is this: we cannot be ignorant as people. We cannot be ignorant as citizens. We have to know our history. If we don't know our history, we're doomed to make the same mistakes. Mankind does this over and over and over and over again. But a population that knows their history, leaders that know their history, avoid falling in a lot of these pitfalls. Okay? Any questions? Yes?
What was like the first country to get like planes for war?
The first country?
Yeah.
During World War I, Germany, England, France, United States, Russia, some extent. First time the airplanes were used. First time tanks were used. Machine guns, landmines, barbed wire, all that fun stuff. Just kidding. All right. So, somebody raise their hand and sum up. Why do we study history?
Someone repeat it.
So we're not going to repeat it. Okay? You don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Okay. The notes will be on the blog for you, right?
Yes.
They'll also be up on the Mimeo for you. There's a little part on the website that says Mimeo recordings. For when I don't get the projector, I'm going to work on that. You can keep that, put that in your folder, your notebook, your binder. And when the bell rings, have a ready to go. Was it fun? Everyone can see your internet. Yeah, make sure we get the channel.
I'll see him again. Stop. Who? You. What? Don't play right on.
No, I don't complain about it. Chill out.
Or chill out.
Yeah, further.
Did you hear condition yesterday? Talking about beach
Have a good day.